Good morning. Come on in. Have a seat. How's everybody doing this morning? That is really good to hear. So welcome. So good to see you all. And thank you if you're watching from home. We want you to feel that this is just as your home too. So welcome. Let's see, what's next? Oh, gotta pray, right, Ross? Okay. Let's have a prayer. Heavenly Father, we praise you so much. We thank you for this time. We thank you for this place that you have us in. And Lord, that you would build into us so we can build into our community and our nation and our families. And Lord, we just praise you and honor you and ask that you open our ears and our hearts to the message today. And Lord, that invade us with your presence. In Jesus' name, amen.
Good morning and welcome to Dungeness Community Church. If you are joining us for the first time, please stop by the welcome desk to receive a gift bag and more information about DCC. If you're viewing online, you can click the Connect button on our website. Join Barb Pascal as she leads a 60-minute class on January 17th to help seniors of all ages and abilities to improve their balance and prevent falling. Class begins at 10 a.m. in the chapel. You can register online. Pastor Lance is hosting a new series on Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. in the chapel. This 6-week marriage enrichment series starts next Sunday and will focus on communication in marriage. Sign up online or contact the office. Do you like to play basketball? DCC is hosting a Fun for All basketball night on January 17th from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. in the auditorium. This is for all ages and skill levels, and pizza will be provided. And now, here's Pastor Lance with an update on our Community Engagement Team Ministries.
Hey, it's Pastor Lance here, and I wanted to let you guys know about an exciting partnership that DCC has entered into with Soup in the Alley. Through our community engagement team, we support them. And so, Soup in the Alley meets Monday through Friday in downtown Sequim, and I want to invite you to check it out either as a volunteer or as a customer. And now for some more information.
Hi, my name's Anna. I'm one of the managers at Soup in the Alley, which is a nonprofit opened by Calvary Chapel Sequim. We're located downtown, and what we offer is ramen soup from Monday to Friday for lunch. And it's all by donation, so if you can't pay, don't worry about it. But if you can pay it forward and help pay for the person next to you.
I've been looking for opportunities in some way to serve those less fortunate than ourselves. And when we saw it in one of the programs for DCC and areas that we can help in the city, this jumped out at me as a chance to try to do something.
Well, I love that people can come in and have a hot meal, whether they don't have a home or whether they have one and want to come in and pay it forward and sit down and visit with other people.
Not only do I get to talk with people in the community and build relationships, but I also get to help others at the same time and give them a warm meal that's well needed.
We were able to volunteer right away. Today was our training day, first day here, and it took about 15 minutes to become an expert at it. And we served quite a few people today.
I've never worked in restaurants before. This is the first time I've ever done anything at the restaurant at all, volunteered.
I think it was excellent quality of food. I certainly enjoyed my lunch here today and look forward to bringing other people here to eat for just a casual lunch sometime.
It's really good. It's good ramen noodles. You can't go wrong.
I recommend all those who have some free time in their hands either come by for a meal and help the community by just eating or just by volunteering some time.
Once again, we want to invite you to check it out as a customer or as a volunteer, and you can contact me for any more information. And now let's join our worship team.
Well, if you're willing and able, we're going to invite you to stand and join us as we sing and worship our God.
Great is the Lord, He is holy and just. By his power we trust in his love. Great is the Lord, he is faithful and true. By his mercy he proves he is love. Great is the Lord and worthy of glory. Great is the Lord and worthy of praise. Great is the Lord. Now lift up your voice. Now lift up your voice. Great is the Lord. Great is the Lord. He is holy and just. By his power we trust in his love. Great is the Lord, he is faithful and true. By his mercy he proves he is love. Great is the Lord and worthy of glory. Great is the Lord and worthy of praise. Great is the Lord. Now lift up your voice. Now lift up your voice. Great is the Lord. Great are you, Lord, and
world to see how great our God is. All that's required is a life lived in obedience and worship. It's in the everyday moments when we have the opportunity to show how great our God is, when we choose to exercise grace and humility and patience, love and kindness with those around us. That shows the greatness of our God. This song we're going to sing next is a new song, and the words speak to that. In every moment, let my life be worship. This moment is holy, and I hear you calling. I turn my face toward you. My heart is open. You're always pursuing, and my life surrender. You have my affection. So let my life be worship, and let my heart stay true. May my love never grow cold. May it burn forevermore. May my life be worship to you. In blessing, in sorrow, in the ordinary, whatever the cost is, you're always worthy. My heart's cry, my whole life is for your glory. You have my attention. So let my life be worship, and let my heart stay true. May my love never grow cold. May it burn forevermore. May my life be worship to you. Let it be worship. You're the only one worth it. Nothing is like you, there's no one beside you. Only you're worthy, worthy. So let it be worship. You're the only one worth it. Nothing is like you, there's no one beside you. Only you're worthy, worthy. So let my life be worship, and let my heart stay true. Let my life be you guys may have noticed for the last few months, I've been struggling with my voice a little. Happened like end of November, got a cold, knocked my voice out for 2 weeks. I could barely whisper, let alone sing. So you saw some different people up here on the platform, which I think is awesome. And, just it was a struggle. Like it wasn't coming back like I wanted it to. And in that season, it's getting there now, and I'm so grateful. But in that season, I was just struggling because it was like losing an appendage. You go to reach for something and it's just not there. And I was just spending time asking God, like, what's going on here? Why is this happening? And He doesn't always answer those questions, but He usually deals with your heart, right? And talks to you about what's going on there. And He just reminded me that there are other ways to worship. Like, yes, He's given me this gift and I can use it for Him, but I can also worship in other ways. And He also reminded me that, His strength is made perfect in my weakness, and that's a good thing. So we're going to sing this last song, and I picked it this morning because it just reminds me of the future that we all have to look forward to. No matter what struggles we're going through on a daily basis, what season we're in, if we love Jesus, then we have an eternity to worship Him with all the saints and angels gathered around His throne. And this morning, we're going to join them, and we're going to sing, "Worthy is the Lamb." And so I just encourage you, lift up your voices, worship with all that's in you, join the saints and angels. He's worthy of all our praise. Amen.
Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Holy, holy is He. Sing a new song to Him who sits on heaven's mercy seat.
we're going to start a new series today called The Outrageous Sayings of Jesus. But first, I need to announce that we have a new pastor of family ministries, Josh DeShazer. So, this is Josh and Heidi. Josh has been on staff with Westminster Chapel, spent several years there, has just finished his master's degree at Western Seminary, and Heidi is an RN, and she grew up a pastor's kid in Port Orchard. Her dad is, I think, just retiring this March, she said, after 20 years of pastoring the Evangelical Free Church down there. And they plan to be starting on February 1st. So we're very excited. We had just great interviews with them. Yeah. So they'll be coming. You'll get introduced to them. Just a wonderful couple. And one specific need we have for them, as you know, finding housing in Sequim can be a challenge. And so it's the two of them and a dog named Boo. Well, I don't know if his name is Boo, but anyway, they've got this. He's not a big dog, small dog. And so if you have any good leads on a place to rent, they are looking. Let the church office know, let me know, and that would be great to help them out. Okay, we now return to our regularly scheduled programming. You know, one of the job dangers that public speakers live with is the ever-present possibility that you're going to say something that is truly embarrassing. And when you do, you'll do it in front of possibly hundreds of people. And thanks to the internet age and live streams, it'll be recorded for future generations to replay at will. I have had a few of mine over the years. But rather than rehearsing that boring old history, I thought I'd look for other people's gaffes. And it only took a little bit of Googling to find a list of these kinds of outrageous faux pas that other pastors have committed. And I have to tell you, there's a long list, most of which I can't even repeat up here because it went so badly for these poor guys. But a couple that I do feel free to share. One was a pastor who, during his Christmas sermon, was trying to describe how much he enjoyed the lights of Christmas at home. And what he said was, "I love sitting in the living room with nothing on but the Christmas tree." Or how about the poor guy that was trying to quote the Old Testament passage about the fruit of the womb? The passage says, "Behold, children are a blessing from the Lord." He said, "The fruit of the loom is a reward." Which I'm thinking maybe he and the Christmas tree guy should have worked something out there. You know, saying outrageous things can be embarrassing. It can also be a good way to lose a following. If you've been watching the trajectory of Elon Musk these last few weeks, you know that he's managed to tank the value of his companies by about 70%. And this week I hear that he set the record for the most money lost in history by a single individual, about $200 billion. And a lot of his financial damage has come just because of the things that he's said. Of course, outrageous sounding things can also be a good way to get sleepy folks to take notice. I'm not aware that Jesus ever made a verbal gaffe. In fact, there's probably a whole theological debate that could be had as to whether or not Jesus in his humanity could have made a mistake in public speaking. But that aside, Jesus knew the value of saying things that would make heads turn, that would grab people's attention. And throughout his ministry, he said quite a few things that at times puzzled people, sometimes it shocked them, sometimes it angered them. Some of those outrageous sayings drew people to him. For instance, when he called out the hypocrisy of religious leaders that everybody could see, but no one had the guts to say it out loud, Jesus named it for what it was. Some things turned people away, like you recall the story of the wealthy young man who came to Jesus and he said, "What do I need to do to inherit, eternal life?" And Jesus said, "Well, sell everything that you have, give it to the poor, and come follow me." And the guy is shocked, and we're told that he just turned and walked away sad. So sometimes the outrageous things that Jesus said drew people to him. Other times, it turned people away. We're going to spend the next few weeks considering some of the outrageous things that Jesus said. And hopefully we'll find some things in there that will speak to us in good ways. The first one we're going to look at this morning comes out of Luke chapter 7, the first 10 verses. Here's what it says. After he'd finished all his sayings in the hearing of the people, he entered Capernaum. Now a centurion had a servant who was sick and at the point of death, who was highly valued by him. When the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent to him elders of the Jews, asking him to come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded with him earnestly, saying, "He's worthy to have you do this for him, for he loves our nation, and he's the one who built us our synagogue." And Jesus went with them. When he was not far from the house, the centurion sent friends, saying to him, "Lord, do not trouble yourself, for I am not worthy to have you come under my roof. Therefore I did not presume to come to you, but say the word, and let your servant be healed. For I too am a man set under authority with soldiers under me, and I say to one, 'Go,' and he goes, and to another, 'Come,' and he comes, and to my servant, 'Do this,' and he does it." When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him, and turning to the crowd that followed him, said, "I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith." And when those who had been sent returned to the house, they found the servant well. Now, that story, I think to most of us sounds amazing. It sounds exciting. It probably doesn't sound outrageous to our ears. But in the ears of the people who first heard Jesus say that, what Jesus said had the effect of fingernails on a chalkboard for them. And if we're going to hear it, we have to immerse ourselves a bit into the setting of the story. Now, the place where this happens is a town called Capernaum. Capernaum became Jesus' base of operations after he was driven out of Nazareth, because some of the things he said and did there turned people off. Now, Capernaum, its major trade was fishing, but it was also a center of commerce. And it was significant enough on the trade routes that there was a Roman garrison stationed there. Now, this incident, Luke chapter 7, is not the first time that we have record of Jesus going to Capernaum. In fact, if you were to go back a little bit earlier to Luke chapter 4, you'd find this story of his first visit. He went down to Capernaum, a city of Galilee, and he was teaching them on the Sabbath, and they were astonished at his teaching, for his word possessed authority. And in the synagogue there was a man who had the spirit of an unclean demon, and he cried out with a loud voice, "Ha! What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." But Jesus rebuked him, saying, "Be silent and come out of him." And when the demon had thrown him down in their midst, he came out of him, having done him no harm. And they were all amazed and said to one another, "What is this word? For with authority and power he commands the unclean spirits, and they come out." And reports about him went out into every place in the surrounding region. And he arose and left the synagogue and entered Simon's house. Now Simon's mother-in-law was ill with a high fever, and they appealed to him on her behalf. And he stood over her and rebuked the fever, and it left her. And immediately she rose and began to serve them. Now when the sun was setting, all those who had any who were sick with various diseases brought them to him, and he laid his hands on every one of them and healed them. Now this gives us some important background information for what happens in Luke chapter 7. A few key events from this first visit. The first is that Jesus' teaching astonished those who came to listen to him. And the specific thing they noted, the specific thing that was astonishing, was that his word possessed authority. Now, we don't know exactly what was said or how he said it, but there was something in his delivery, something in the content that struck his audience as distinctly different from other rabbis they had listened to. The rabbinical method for teaching often revolved around asking questions. And Jesus himself did that. Jesus often asked questions as a way of teaching. But he also wasn't reluctant to make declarations and to declare that what he said was the truth. The rabbis also loved to quote and reference others in their teaching. much like maybe a modern day lawyer would cite prior case law to help make his argument. And my guess is that part of what made Jesus' teaching sound different was that he didn't lean on others to bolster his point. In fact, we get a flavor of this style of teaching in the Sermon on the Mount. Let me give you one quick example. And now watch this, because you'll see Jesus actually cites someone else, but watch what he does with it. You have heard that it was said, he's not going to cite someone else, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, he raises the bar. He says, that's not good enough, what you've heard others say. The standard is, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. No apologies, no leaning on others for his opinion. He says, this is true. Second thing that struck them was his authority over the demonic spirits. I mean, you look at the no-nonsense way that Jesus dealt with the unclean spirit that had tried to disrupt him as he taught in the synagogue. He says, be silent and come out of him. Boom, delivered, done. And again, what impressed the crowds was his authority. In this instance, over evil spirits. So I want you to tuck that word authority into your short-term memory banks. A third thing I think is interesting to note is that all of this occurred in the synagogue in Capernaum, because the very existence of that synagogue plays a part in the story in Luke chapter 7. You remember what the Jewish elders told Jesus about the synagogue. They said that this synagogue was built for them by the Centurion. They said, in fact, he is worthy to have you grant his request because he's the one that built this synagogue for us. So the synagogue that Jesus did his miracles in Luke chapter 4 is the synagogue that the Centurion helped build in Luke chapter 7. And the fourth thing is that Jesus' events in Capernaum went viral in a first century, no Twitter, no Facebook sort of way. It says news about him, reports about him went out into every place in the surrounding region. And so it's with that background in mind that we come to Luke chapter 7 and this story about the centurion's request. See, when Jesus walked back into town, there was already a buzz going on. He'd been there before. He'd done amazing things. People were astonished, and now he's come back to town. And the centurion would have certainly been aware of what transpired. As Luke points out, this was one Roman who had a genuine love for the Jews living in his jurisdiction. So much so that he had provided the financing to build their synagogue. And it's interesting, archaeologists say they have found that synagogue. Now, I have to do a correction here, because when I looked this up, it said this was the picture of that synagogue. Somebody first service said that's actually the 3rd century synagogue they found, but they found the foundations of the 1st century synagogue that the centurion built. I'm not able to prove it either way, but just trust me, he built the synagogue. So any Roman official with the kind of ties this guy had to the Jewish community would have been fully aware of what Jesus had done. And the things that would have stuck in his memory were the same things that stuck with everyone else. This was a rabbi that had unique spiritual authority. This was a rabbi who, with a word, could heal the sick and could command demons to leave. So what do we know about the centurion himself? Well, he was a Roman, and as such, in Jewish eyes, he was an outsider by birth. He was a Gentile. He was Goyim. He was not entitled to the special inheritance, the promises that were given to God's chosen people, to the sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He was not one of them. But he was more than just an outsider. He represented an oppressor. He was a centurion, a professional military man of rank. He had authority over 100 soldiers. And so on one hand, he represented law and order for that town. He was the equivalent of the local police chief. On the other hand, he represented the boot of Rome. He was literally Caesar's boots on the ground in that town. And his very presence was a constant reminder that the Jews were a conquered people. As a centurion, he not only had military power, he had wealth. We're told that this servant who was sick is one of his servants. He had multiple servants. He had the means to build a beautiful synagogue for the Jewish inhabitants. I think he also was a good leader. As I was preparing this message, I had the idea to ask a couple of guys in our congregation that I know have lengthy backgrounds in leadership, particularly in military and law enforcement leadership. So I invited Jim Spring. Jim's got a 30-year military career behind him, and Ron Peregrine, who has spent years in leadership in the Navy, the Coast Guard, as well as law enforcement. And I asked them to give me their impression of this story. As military men, what do they see when they read about this military man coming to Jesus? And both of them zeroed in on two qualities that they saw in this centurion. The first thing they noted was that good leaders don't just stand back and tell other people where to go. That good leaders take responsibility to use their rank, use their authority to open doors and to enable those who serve under them. Now, the contrast to that would be the legendary story of Alexander the Great. As the story goes, Alexander had led his troops up to attack a city high on a hill, fortified city. And when he got there, he first gave the ruler of that city the opportunity to simply surrender without laying siege to the city. And the ruler's immediate response was, "We'll not surrender because there isn't an army around that could take this city and our fortifications." Alexander's response to that was he ordered some of his soldiers to line up single file and told them to start marching. He had them marching toward a cliff. And they got closer and closer, and they just kept marching. Nobody flinched, nobody stopped, until the first soldier went over the edge. And the second soldier went over the edge behind him. And the third soldier went over the edge. And of course, the leader of this city is horrified when he's watching, and Alexander suddenly commands halt. And the line of soldiers halts. And Alexander turns back to the city ruler and he says, "Now would you like to surrender?" And he did. Now, I would say that is a way that we often think of power in leadership. That powerful leaders can simply use other people for their own purposes, to take no thought, no value for their life. Now, that story is no doubt apocryphal, which is a fancy term for didn't happen but still a good story. But it conveys this idea that sometimes creeps into leadership. Remember Jesus when he's talking to his disciples about leaders? And he says, you know how the world does leadership, how they lord it over those under them? And he says, it's not supposed to be that way among you. Your kind of leadership, my kind of leadership, Jesus says, is a servant kind of leadership. And I think this centurion gives evidence that he was that kind of leader. He took it on himself to go looking for help for a servant. He was willing to use his influence that he had with the local Jewish leaders to call in a favor, to get them to go to this rabbi to see if perhaps he would heal his servant. The second thing Jim and Ron noted was this leader's humility. He was aware of his own authority. He knew his power, but that knowledge was tempered by this awareness that there was a power greater than himself. And he was humble enough to recognize and openly admit that Jesus had access, had authority with that power that he did not have. That Jesus could do things that he could not do. Now, the Jewish elders who approached Jesus made the point that this man is worthy. Jesus, you should do this for this man because he is worthy. It's interesting when the centurion gets his 2 cents in. He says, I am not worthy. Jesus, you don't owe me anything. I don't have anything by way of my own accomplishments or wealth or power or position that would obligate you to give me your attention, let alone grant my request. He was willing to view the spiritual authority of Jesus as something akin to his own authority as a Roman centurion. And you think about it, for a Roman to ascribe such authority to a Jew is truly remarkable. Along with that sense of himself, I think this centurion recognized that there was a cultural inappropriateness in the eyes of the Jews to have one of their respected rabbis enter into his Gentile home. In many circles, that was forbidden activity. And this centurion, in respect for that, not wanting to put Jesus in a place that would compromise him, seeks to honor that and says, Jesus, you don't need to come into my house. You can just speak the word, and that will be enough. Now, what do we know about the servant? Well, virtually nothing. We don't know his name. We don't know his nationality. We don't know his specific duties within the household. We don't know why he was so highly valued. We don't know about his spiritual condition. About the only thing we know is that he was sick. Luke tells us he was sick to the point of death. Matthew adds a little bit more detail to this. He says, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, suffering terribly. That's about all we know about the servant. Well, and one more thing, that he was healed completely. But you see, Matthew and Luke, they want our attention not so much focused on the healing, as they want us to focus on the interaction between Jesus and the servant's master, this Roman centurion. So what was outrageous? Well, the fact that Jesus was willing to respond to this Roman centurion's humble request, well, that wasn't outrageous. I mean, it was the leaders of the synagogue, right? The Jewish leaders of the synagogue who had come to Jesus originally to ask him to do something to help this centurion. Now, the fact that a Roman centurion would have such a mutually respectful relationship with the local Jewish community, well, that's surprising, but it's not outrageous. Where it gets outrageous is when Jesus proclaims that this Roman is a man of finer faith than his fellow Israelites. Look at Jesus' words. This is from the New Living Translation. I haven't seen faith like this in all Israel. Really? No one in Israel. His disciples are standing right there. That had to sting a little. The elders of the synagogue, who only moments before had come on behalf of this centurion to do something nice for this Roman pagan, they couldn't have been too pleased to hear themselves suddenly demoted to second fiddle to the Gentile. And the Jewish audience gathered all around certainly weren't impressed. I mean, they had spent lifetimes of religious observance and routines that were saturated in the teachings and the rhythms that had been passed down to them since the time of Moses. And to hear Jesus now gushing over a Gentile Roman soldier as having the greatest faith of any of them, that wasn't going to win him friends. Now Luke, in his gospel, stops there. But Matthew includes some more of what Jesus said, and it only rubs salt in the wound. Here's what Matthew records Jesus went on to say. I tell you, many will come from east and west and recline at table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. All right, there's the big three for the children of Israel. Yeah, that's the banquet. We're all going to the banquet. But, he says, the sons of the kingdom, many Israelites, will be thrown into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. All of you that figured you automatically had a party invitation, some of you aren't going to make it. And you know what the implication here is? This Roman centurion, who's shown greater faith than any of you, it looks like he gets a party invite. Wow. I mean, like Jesus doesn't know when to leave things well enough alone. We're having this beautiful little moment of interracial reconciliation, ecumenical goodwill. And rather than capitalizing on all the good vibes that are going around, Jesus decides to grab a stick and just poke his own team right in the eye. For the Jews that were listening to Jesus, that statement had to be outrageous. And Jesus knew that. This wasn't a verbal gaffe. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. He was trying to shake them up. Because there was something big that was happening right in front of them, and he knew that they weren't getting it. They were impressed. They were amazed. But they weren't seeing him for who he really was. And Jesus wanted to shock them into seeing what the centurion saw. So what did the centurion see? Well, a few moments ago, I asked you to hang on to a word. What was the word? Authority. That's what the centurion saw. He saw authority. But authority can mean different things, can't it? Our son-in-law, Matt Hama, is an authority on certain aspects of the Dead Sea Scrolls. He spent the last bunch of years working for his PhD, studying in the area of Dead Sea Scrolls. Hours, weeks, months, years, immersing himself in the literature and the research. Really cool thing is, Friday afternoon, Birmingham, England, he met the defense board with his dissertation, and now he is Dr. Matthew Hama. So, now I can tell you a bit about the Dead Sea Scrolls, but I am not an authority. Matt has this depth of knowledge. He has expertise that has been earned through all the work and the research that he's done. That's the kind of authority the folks around Jesus expected from their religious leaders. They were men of learning. They could debate the technical points of theology. They knew the scriptures in a level of detail beyond anything the average guy on the street knew. They were religious authorities. Jesus knew things too. His depth of knowledge was recognized early on. One of the only stories we have recorded about Jesus as a youth happened when he turned 12 years old. His parents had made the annual pilgrimage to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover. There were huge crowds in the city, and his parents had traveled with a large group of pilgrims. And somewhere in all the chaos of the trip and heading back toward home, they got separated from Jesus. And in a time before cell phones, getting separated, trying to find each other again was a big deal. Do you remember what it was like traveling with other people to an unfamiliar place in separate cars before we had cell phones? You're following along, all of a sudden take a turn, you didn't see the turn, and now you've lost them. And this debate ensues. Do you remember this? Well, should we stop and wait for them to find us? Or have they stopped and we should go find them? Or are we both stopped, waiting for the other one? Or are we both driving in circles, hoping that someone's going to stop? We had some good friends back in the 80s who tried to lead us to a new restaurant. We got separated. We haven't seen them since. Okay, that's not true. Well, Jesus and his parents got separated, and it took 3 days of desperate searching before they were reunited. Here's what they encountered when they finally located him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions, and all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. So Jesus, even at a very young age, demonstrated that he was an authority on the scriptures. But that's not what impressed the centurion. What the centurion saw was that Jesus had authority. He didn't just know things. He was in charge of things. That's why the comparison that the centurion makes between his own authority and that of Jesus is so powerful. The centurion wasn't just an authority on military history. He couldn't just tell you the facts and the minutiae about Roman wars. He was a man who had authority to make things happen. He could wage war. To a casual observer, he might look like just another soldier, but to the 100 men under his authority, if he said jump, their only two questions were, how high and when can I come down, sir? That's the kind of authority this centurion believed Jesus had. He wasn't placing his confidence in what Jesus knew. His faith was in who Jesus was. Jesus might look like just another rabbi, but the centurion recognized that he was more than that. He wasn't just an exceptional practitioner of spirituality. He didn't just know good techniques for getting things done. Jesus possessed the authority to speak a command, and forces greater than any the centurion could defeat would respond, yes, sir. And it was that confidence, that level of faith that Jesus says exceeded anything he had seen among his own people of Israel. This Gentile Roman outsider had figured it out. You are the one with authority. Here's the other thing the centurion had figured out that I think impressed Jesus. He recognized that if Jesus chose to use his authority to help him, it would not be because he had earned it. The Jewish elders who approached Jesus operated on the assumption that Jesus might help because this centurion was worthy of being helped. Right? That's their argument. He's worthy. He's done enough good stuff that I think he's earned a solid from you, Jesus. But the centurion recognizes that a man with the kind of authority that Jesus possessed did not owe any favors to a subordinate. And so he comes to Jesus with the humility of low rank. He comes and he says, I am unworthy. Don't trouble yourself to take another step on my behalf. You just speak a word. That's all I need. And what did he hear in return? Jesus said, you're not unworthy of my attention. You're welcome to come to me. I will listen. I will respond. So what can we take away from this story? Well, the first big takeaway is that Jesus has all authority. He's more than a great teacher. He's more than a great moral example. He is the one who is in charge. Here are the final words recorded of Jesus in Matthew's Gospel, from Matthew chapter 28. Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Jesus has all authority. Second takeaway. Jesus listens to unworthy people. If you think that the only way that you can hold Jesus' gaze or earn his favor is by being worthy, you're either going to be a hyper-driven, spiritually neurotic, self-righteous mess, or a totally defeated, shame-filled, back-row believer. If the way that I get God's attention, if the way that I win his favor is by being worthy, it's a losing proposition. Think about who was healed that day. It was a lowly, sick, paralyzed slave. There was nothing that he could do for himself. There's nothing recorded of him that merited special favor by Jesus. Think about who brought that servant's need to Jesus. It was a member of a social class which by and large was hated by the Jews, a Roman centurion. In fact, that Gentile centurion, if he had attempted to go to Jerusalem, to go to the temple, that very same temple where Jesus had been when he was 12 years old, if he had tried to go into that temple, he would have been required to stand in the outermost court, the court of the Gentiles, as far from the center of action as you could get, because he was not considered worthy to be inside that temple. Some of those Orthodox Jews that he had befriended, the very people that he'd helped to fund their synagogue, when it came to mealtime, they wouldn't have a meal with him. They weren't allowed to have a meal with him because he was not worthy. What grabbed Jesus' attention? The thing that earned his smile, that ended in a healing, wasn't worthiness. It was a simple step of faith. There was this deep awareness that he had no grounds to expect Jesus to do anything for him, but he was still willing to ask for help. It was this humble admission by a powerful man that he was not powerful enough to solve his problem. It was the humble recognition that Jesus alone had the kind of authority and power that he needed. Which means that this story is really all about the gospel. Because that's what the good news is. That the God of power and authority has made himself available to unworthy people like you and me and has invited us in grace to come to him and ask for his help. He invites us not because we deserve an answer, but because he is pleased to hear us. Here's what this story is not. This story is not a formula for manipulating God to get him to do what we want. That's what people sometimes try to turn faith into, isn't it? As some kind of technique that will give us authority to make God do what we want. Real faith isn't a power grab. It's a heart posture of trust. The Apostle Paul was certainly a man of great faith. At one point, he recounted an ailment he had, which he said he asked God 3 times to take away. The answer he received was, "My grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness." Same God, same faith, different outcome. Sometimes our desires and God's plans differ. When that happens, it's important to remember who is in authority. Real faith is not demanding an outcome, but rather it is humbly placing ourselves under his authority. Not because we are worthy, but because he loves us. Because he is the one with authority, we choose to do what he asks us to do. We choose to be who he asks us to be. We choose to go where he asks us to go. We choose to release the things he asks us to release. Faith is placing our request before him and then releasing the outcome into his hands, knowing that his plan is perfect and his power is sufficient. When I was thinking about how to finish this sermon, I thought, really, the best way to do it would be give you a chance to pray. Not just a big group prayer. Some of you need some personal time. So I've asked a few people, some leaders, to be available up front here as we close the service. We're going to sing a final song. Worship team, you guys can come on up. And I would encourage you, if you're here this morning and you just need someone to pray with you, maybe you're carrying a heavy burden on your heart. Maybe you're looking for direction for the future. Maybe you're struggling with a failure and you just need someone to pray with you. We'd be honored to do that. And I invite you just to come down. As the song finishes up, come on down and don't walk out of here without talking to the Lord.
So this morning, we humble ourselves. We ask that you do the work in our hearts that only you can do. You're the one who knows what each of us is facing in our everyday lives. And you're the one who gives us the grace and strength to walk through it. We thank you for that, for your love and mercy that you pour out, for your mercies that you make new every day. So we invite you by your Spirit to do what only you can do in our lives, so that we may glorify you in all we say and do. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Hey, like I said, we've got some folks, they've got these little lanyards on. This side says need prayer, this side says nothing at all. So they're up here. I see Ross and Kathy right here as well. Again, don't just walk out of here. Take some time to pray. And these folks are available to pray with you if you'd like. We're dismissed.